So we need energy for muscle contraction. And the energy that we use is found in a molecule called ATP. You don't need to know what this means in terms of like, what is the abbreviation of this? This is just high energy molecule. It's called adenosine triphosphate. It can be converted back and forth. So this chemical reaction can take place in two directions, and it can produce ADP, which is diphosphate, plus we've broken a bond here. So there's a phosphate group broken off, and then this releases energy. So the important thing is that this is the energy right here that is used to power the sliding of the filaments. So where does ATP bind? ATP binds to the myosin heads. And energizes them. So the energy can be stored in those myosin heads. This energy can then, when there is a connection, which they call a cross bridge, between the myosin heads and the actin, they could cause the pivoting of the heads so that the filaments slide together. So energizes them. So when a cross bridge is formed, between the myosin heads and actin, the pivoting, the energy is actually turned into mechanical energy. The heads pivot and cause the sarcomere to shorten. Okay, so let's look at a diagram of this process of ATP binding to the myosin heads. This is the myosin heads. So these are the myosin heads right here. So this whole thing is the thick filament. This is the thin filament, and you'll notice that it has the myosin head binding sites covered by the tropomyosin. So ATP binds. So let's start here. ATP binds. It is going to energize this. So it's going to energize the myosin head. And when the myosin heads bind to the actin, it is then going to cause this pivoting. So notice that the myosin head pivots, and it's going to cause a shortening because of the whole sarcomere, because the actin and the myosin filaments are going to slide together. Now, something interesting happens right here in that this connection cannot be broken unless another ATP molecule binds. That's kind of weird, but it actually explains rigor mortis. So this contraction and stiffening of the body at death or a little bit after death. And then that subsequently goes away as the body decomposes, right? So let's talk about rigor mortis. What does mortis mean? That means death. So it's rigidity and muscle contraction after death. And if you're interested in crime, you know, they can tell maybe sometimes how long a person has died by like the state of the rigor mortis in the body, and if it has gone away already because this body has started to decompose. So we could say that another ATP molecule must bind to cause the cross bridge to be broken. So after death, we run out of ATP. after a certain period of time. And so the muscles will stay in a contracted form. Until again, we have decomposition, which eventually will just cause the cells to rupture and everything to just disintegrate and be recycled by the decomposers in our environment. Okay, so this is kind of shows that breaking of the cross bridge would be kind of, actually it's not shown here, but we see as the myosin head binds ATP, the cross bridge detaches from axon. So that would be this part right here. So that shows how the cross bridge is broken. And so it is a cycle. We can talk about the types of energy that are used to generate ATP to produce this. So we could talk about the generation of the ATP. Okay, so let's talk about that here. So we actually have a little bit of ATP stored in our muscles, and that is used for just a short duration of muscle contraction. And then we have to produce more ATP. And so if we look at this generation of ATP, we have this showing this process. So for example, we have ATP being broken down, but then creatine, you might hear of that as being supplements for like weightlifters, can actually cause ATP to be produced. Okay, so we can store it. We can, for like 15 seconds, we can actually also produce it using creatine phosphate. So the first energy that we use stored energy in the form of ATP and ATP produced using what is called creatine phosphate. Okay. We could also, if the activity is slow enough, like we're jogging or we're walking or we can breathe, we can use aerobic respiration. So this means that we use oxygen to produce ATP efficiently. So that is for like long-term, we talk about aerobic exercises, being able to talk while you're doing the exercise, right? So we can breathe, we can get oxygen, we can replenish our ATP stores. The last one is anaerobic. So this is anaerobic, and this is where we produce ATP, but it is inefficient, and it also produces lactic acid. So the third way that we produce energy is anaerobically. So this is without oxygen. And it is inefficient. So it doesn't produce a lot of ATP, and it also produces lactic acid as a waste product. Okay. So let's go back and look at these comparisons. So several minutes to an hour, that would be duration of energy. That is aerobic. If we are just going to like sprint, okay, we would have enough energy to produce. And so, for example, like weightlifting, like when you're lifting weights, Oftentimes, the amount of ATP that is necessary to lift a really heavy weight is more than can be generated aerobically. So it's called anaerobic. So like weightlifting tends to be anaerobic because we're not breathing in enough oxygen to generate ATP aerobically. And so these are the different ways that ATP can be generated for use in muscle contraction.